Welcome everyone. Here in this video we will be starting with the new chapter, last chapter of this syllabus of our syllabus. We have completed almost all the chapters. Now this is the only one chapter which is left. I have explained you all the chapters in the class, that is in the previous videos, and I have explained you few chapters in your classes as well, in the physical offline classes which we have taken. So this is the last lesson which is left for you people, and that is one important lesson according to this examination point of view. From this examination point of view, you have many you will get questions from this lesson. The lesson here is the cell, the unit of life. Cell, the unit of life. We have discussed about this, that just in the previous classes. In the previous class, in the 9th class specially, we have this cell, structure of cell. What are the different organelles present in the cell? Just a brief introduction of the cell is there in the previous classes, earlier classes. Now in this lesson, we will study in detail about the cell. What is the structure of the cell, what are the different organelles which are present in the cell, how cell help us in carrying out the daily activities, what are the different organelles, what are the different functions those organelles perform. So everything about what are the organelles which are present in the cell, everything we will be studying in detail. Okay. So now coming to this chapter, we will be wondering, that is, what is the difference between the living and the non-living? What makes the organism a living organism? We have discussed in our first chapter that what makes the organism a living organism. Okay, so we said that growth is one property which is seen in living organism, metabolism is one property which is seen in living organism. Okay, so nervous activity, many activities are there which makes an organism a living organism, but here a living organism will be having cell. Cell is the basic unit of living organism. Without cell, the organism cannot be said, that is living cell, organism cannot be said as a living organism. So cell is the basic unit of a living organism. Cell is the basic structural and functional unit of a living organism. What is cell? The cell is the basic structural. The cell is, we said that organisms are said to be living with the, that is when the organism has cell. So here what is cell? The cell is the basic structural and functional unit. The cell is the basic structural and functional unit of living organism. Without cell, living organisms cannot exist. Now coming to this, a cell, we have seen that there are two types of organism based on the number of cells. Based on the number of cells present, the organisms are broadly classified as two types: unicellular organism and multicellular organism. Unicellular organism and multicellular organisms. So unicellular organism, their whole body is made up of just one cell. Their whole body is made up of just one cell, whereas multicellular organisms, their bodies are made up of innumerable number of cells, many number of cells. So unicellular organism, just one cell. So here that one cell is an independent cell. The one cell is a independent cell. So here in unicellular organisms, their body is made up of just single cell, and that single cell is can exist independently. That single cell can exist independently. That is unicellular organism, it can exist independently, it can survive, that is it respires like we respire, it eats the food like we eat food. Okay. So amoeba is a unicellular organism. The body is made up of just one cell. So amoeba can respire, amoeba can eat the food, amoeba shows digestion, amoeba shows excretion, amoeba shows reproduction. So whatever activities we human beings, we are multicellular organisms. We are multicellular organisms. So here whatever functions we perform, the same functions can also be performed by the unicellular organism, whereas our body is made up of many cells, their body is just made up of single cell. okay, but that single cell is able to exist, is able to survive. How it is able to survive? It can respire, it can digest, it can excrete, it shows all the functions. It shows all the functions which are required to be performed for a person, for an organism to be a living, for an organism to be a living. So, here the single cell, it should be capable of independent existence without the help of any other cell. That single cell should be able to exist, that single cell should be able to perform all the essential functions of the life. It should be able to perform all the essential functions of life like respiration, digestion and all. So, here amoeba is a unicellular organism. It is made up of one cell. Okay, bacteria is made up of one cell, that is the whole body of bacteria is made up of just one cell. But this cell, one cell can exist independently. It does not need help of any other living organism. It can survive on its own. How it can survive on its own? It is able to perform all the functions. It is able to perform all the functions like respiration, digestion, excretion, all the functions, neural activity, everything for that is not neural activity, whatever the functions which are required for the organism to be living, it is able to, this single cell is able to perform. So, here this single cell should be able to perform all the function and should be able to exist independently. Less than any cell, less than a cell, it is the if an organism has less than cell, then it cannot be able to exist independently. If an organism does not have cell, okay, so it will not be able to exist independently. Organism which have less than cell, then those organisms cannot exist independently. If an organism has to exist independently, then it should have at least cell. Without cell, less than cell, no living organism can exist. Without cell, no living organism can exist independently. So, exist. So, now we already know that the single cell is able to perform all the functions. So, that is why the cell is called as the basic structural and functional. It is called as the basic structural and functional unit of life. Whatever the function is performed by the cell, then those are the functions of the living organism. Whatever the functions are performed by the cells, those functions are performed by the living organism. So, that is why it is called as the cell is the basic structural and functional unit of organisms. Now, different scientists, the cell was discovered by that is Robert Hooke. The cell, discovery of the cell. The cell was first discovered by Robert Hooke. Okay. Robert Hooke discovered the cell in non-living thing. It discovered the cell from a cock. So, it discovered it from the non-living things. The first discovery of the cell was done by a scientist called as Robert Hooke, but he discovered the cell from the non-living thing. Another scientist whose name is Antony von Leeuwenhoek. Antony von Leeuwenhoek. He discovered the cell in the living organisms. He was a microbiologist. He was microbiologist. He used to discover microscopes. So, with the help of that microscope, he was able to see the things. He was able to see the things which are unable to see with our naked eyes. So, with the discovery of this microscope, the Antony von Leeuwenhoek discovered the cell in the living organism for the first time. Okay. Robert Hooke also discovered, but he discovered it in the non-living organism. So, the first cell which was discovered in living organism was done by Antony von Leeuwenhoek. Later, one more scientist whose name was Robert Brown. He discovered that inside the cell a stained body is present, and we call that stained body as the nucleus. So, living cell was discovered by Antony von Leeuwenhoek. Inside the living cell, a stained body will be present. That stained body is called as the nucleus. It was discovered by Robert Brown. Okay, it was discovered by Robert Brown. Later on, many scientists did many research. Many scientists did research, and here there is one scientist which is called as Theodore Schleiden, a scientist whose name was Schleiden. Schleiden. Okay, he researched on the plant cell. He researched on the plants and he discovered that plants are made up of different types of cells, and those different types of cells combine and form the tissues. So, what the scientist said, that is Schleiden. Schleiden is the name of the scientist. He did research. He was a botanist. He was a botanist. He researched on the plants and said that all the plants are made up of different type of cells, and those different cells combine to form tissues. Those different cells combine to form tissues. At the same time, another scientist whose name was whose name was Schwann. So, he was also doing research simultaneously at some other place. Okay, but he was a zoologist. Schwann was a zoologist. He was just doing research on the animals, and he found that animals are also made up of different types of cells, and the cell is covered by a membrane. Animals are also made up of different type of cell, and the cell is made up of a membrane. We call that as plasma membrane. Plasma membrane. Okay. Schwann, he was a zoologist. He researched on the animal cell and said that animals are also made up of different cell, and each cell is having a covering. We call that covering as the plasma membrane. We call the covering as the plasma membrane. He also discovered that plant has one more layer around it. Animal cell just have this covering. We call this covering as the plasma membrane. Okay, but plant cells, they have plasma membrane, but around this plasma membrane one more covering is also present. So, this covering is unique to only plants. This covering is unique to only plants, and he called that is now today we call that covering as the cell wall. This cell wall is seen only in plants. It is not present in animals. It is not present in animals. So, following all this research and all, Theodore Schwann, he concluded that all the bodies of animals and plants are composed of cell and its products. Bodies of animals and plants are composed of cell and its product. It was given by Schwann. It was given by the scientist Schwann. Okay. So, Schleiden, he said that plants are also plants made up of different types of cells, and those cells combine and form the tissues. This was said by the scientist Schleiden. Okay. Later on, another scientist Schwann, he said that animals are also made up of living organisms, and they are covered by the cells are covered by cell membrane, and in plants apart from the cell membrane, cell wall is also present, which is at the outside of the cell membrane. So, he come to the conclusion that bodies of plants and animals are composed of cell and its products. Later on, the theories, because they are almost the same. What he said and what he said, they are the same, that is all the plants and animals are made up of different types of cells. Different types of cells. So, they both combined their theories and formulated a new theory which was called as the cell theory. Cell theory. So, according to them, all the living organisms are composed of cells, whether it is plants or whether it is animals or whatever. So, all the living organisms are made up of cells. Okay. But these scientists, they were able to tell that all living organisms are made up of cells. Okay. But they were unable to explain how new cells are formed. They said that living organisms are made up of cells, and the cells shows, that is, if we see this one, This is the prokaryotic cell. So, at the time of division it divides and produces 2 new cells. They were unable to tell you how the new cells are produced. They said that living organisms are composed of cells, but they were unable to explain how new cells are formed. How new cells are formed. Later on another scientist whose name is Rudolf Virchow. Another scientist whose name is Rudolf Virchow. He did research and he concluded that the cells, that is new cells, are formed from pre-existing cell. The new cells are formed from pre-existing cell, that is the parent cell divides and produces new cell. That is, this is the parent cell, this is the pre-existing cell, and from the parent cell only new cells are produced, and that from the parent cell only new cells are produced. So, who said that from the parent cell or from the pre-existing cell new cells are produced? It was discovered by Rudolf Virchow. It was discovered by Rudolf Virchow. Rudolf Virchow said that new cells are formed from pre-existing cells, that is the parent cell, okay, and he called that process as cell division. He called the process as cell division. He said that through cell division new cells are produced. New cells are produced. So, later on that cell theory, after this discovery that cell divide by a process of cell division and produce new cells, which was discovered by Rudolf Virchow. So, now after that Rudolf Virchow discovered the cell division, the cell theory was modified. The cell theory was modified. So, what is the modified version of the cell theory? It states that all living organisms are composed of cells. All living organisms are composed of cells. This is basically the previous point, the point which has taken from the previous one. New point has been added. What is that added new point? That all the cells arise from pre-existing cells. All the cells arise from pre-existing cells. So, it was in different language, in his language, Rudolf Virchow said that omnis cellula de cellula. That means that all the cells arise from pre-existing cells. All the cells arise from pre-existing cells. So, this is the modern modified form of cell theory. Modern modified form of cell theory. So, according to the modern modified form of cell theory, all the living organisms are composed of cells and all the cells arise from the pre-existing cells. All the cells arise from pre-existing cells. Okay. So, this was about the cell theory. So, now we will go and that is we will see this overall view of the cell. Overall view of the cell. What are the cells present? What are the different things which are present in the cells? Just an overview will be seen. Okay, we will see it in the next video. In the next video, we will see the overview of the cell, because this video will be extended. I cannot be able to finish this in this time slot. So, this I will take in another video. This I will take in another video.